You're listening to a 4x4 Radio Network podcast.
Hey, Jeepers. Welcome to show 207. Scott didn't have to tell me that this time. He actually told me yesterday. Of On the Trail with Kevin and Scott. I'm Kevin, the engineer, the guy that basically reads instructions, uses the right tools, and most of the time follows those directions. Although recently there have been a few of those, I'm going to do it my way, but I know it's my fault if it doesn't work then. Across from me on the monitor screen is...
I am Scott. I'm the slapstick parts guy on a continual mission to try to remember all the lines to say that I will not and continue to try and derail poor Kevin's train of thought. I am also the tow pig driver, and I'm also a standard parts guy which delves out bits and baubles upon the technician world so they can make their money. But having said all that mumbo jumbo, I will say this. While we will share what works for us and as well as what didn't, it's up to you to do your research, read the instructions, and please follow them. As Kevin has said many times, the manufacturers spend lots and lots of money to make sure these instructions are mostly done in correct grammar and English, and they would like you to read them because, again, they don't want to have little bits of your own baubles in your hands as everything's broken.
Yeah, and parts left over is rarely a good thing.
Unless you're trying to go for weight reduction. But moving on.
Such it is.
Yes, exactly. So speaking of bits and baubles and things and all that, Kevin, what has been new in your world recently, sir?
Well, we had the opportunity, and this is not directly Jeep related, but it was still cool, to travel to Central Tejas, Texas, for those of you outside of the great Star State, and spend some time with some friends and witness the full eclipse this past month.
Gotcha.
And I will tell you, even though it was cloudy, it was incredible. We had enough gaps in the clouds. I got some grainy iPhone pictures, but others had it of, I've realized as many times as I have been through an eclipse, okay, I've never been through a full eclipse. And the dramatic moment as the full eclipse occurs, and folks, it only lasts about 3 minutes, actually slightly less than 3. It's surreal. It's dimming and it's getting dimmer and it's getting dimmer. And I've lived through that, the ones we've had here in Florida quite a few times recently. But when the, what do they call it? The totality occurs in the official terms. The temperature dropped like you walked into a refrigerator. The light went out. There was enough glow from the corona, and you can look at it straight. That's the only 3 minutes that you can look at the sun straight, and you see the corona. And while that was awesome, and you could actually see a few flares on the sun that they always talk about, but you can never see, the moment in the end, and I hadn't heard of it before, and it's called the wedding ring. And as we are sitting there, and my friend who is the amateur astronomer is telling us, he's coaching us through a small group sitting on his back porch in Blanco, Texas. And yes, it's pronounced Blanco, but the river is called Blanco. They're spelled the same, but it's the Blanco River in Blanco, Texas. The very moment that the disk of the moon moves the first fraction past the disk of the sun, there is a light explosion at a single point that looks like a wedding band with a laser light hitting it. And it lasts about 3 heartbeats and then starts to grow into a semicircle. But when your eyes are dilated because you're in the dark and all of a sudden that explosion occurs, it's an awesome treat.
That's cool.
And so it was a very cool event. I have to admit that we did not drive the Jeep because we were picking up other friends who flew in. And so we were stopping in Houston to the airports. They flew into George Bush and flew out of Hobby, which made it fun. But we were the courier, so we had to take the fix or replace daily because it has a back seat.
Right.
The Jeep technically has one, but I'm not asking my friends. Since we're all above 6.0, some pushing 7.0, I'm not asking him to get in the back seat of a TJ. And I will throw one shout out to a neat thing, folks. Now, if you live in the hill country of Central Texas, or if you're visiting anywhere around the San Antonio, Austin area, Blanco is a little bit west and central between those two locations. And I'm going to admit it's not exactly a place you're going to drive through all the time. But should you be there, you got to check out something, folks. Go back. I have to say this is BJ before Jeep.
Okay.
If you're into old stuff, as opposed to me, who is old stuff, but there's a neat place, and it's called the Buggy Barn, and I got to give them a shout out because it's just one of those places you kind of walk around and you go, do I really want to go in there? And then you go in there, and it's like, this is incredible. They have a collection of all sorts. Well, I don't even know how to. It's a Western history kind of a place. It has probably, I'm going to say, 150 old wagons and buggies and sheep herding wagons, and they're just everywhere. They're lined up and they're in buildings, and you walk around, and they have from the royalty, the big carriages, gilding and stuff like that, all the way down to a muck wagon, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a wagon that you fill full of
refuse,
and they're in various states of repair and disrepair. And there's some in the up floors, and there's Surreys, and there's women's and doctors' coaches, and then there's memorabilia everywhere. And it's basically Western tech. And they have also out back a little movie set for Westerns.
Cool.
And you've got the various offices. They even have a gallows. Okay.
Wow. That way you can hang around.
Yeah. Well, you're going to stand around because the trap door doesn't work. It's locked.
Gotcha.
But, they got the little church. They've got the bar. It ends up the bar gets rented out for venues because people like the old Western.
Sweet.
So a shout out to the folks at the Buggy Barn. It's really cool. And I'm trying to read here. Pardon me, guys. Dennis Moore is the owner and proprietor. He's a great guy. And it's just a neat place. And so if you're in that area and you want an outing to something different, I'd recommend the Buggy Barn. I had a blast. My wife had a blast. We were all walking through that thing. They have tour guides that stand around and walk and answer questions. And if you're there on an interesting day, you never know. They may be shooting an old Western back in the back. And that's pretty cool, too. So anyway, just wanted to give that short little shout out. And I guess we need to switch over. This is going to be a unique show, folks, in that this past couple of weeks, Scott went one way and I went another. So we're going to kind of split the show up a little bit for you and give you the feedback. And we will get to the actual Jeeps because both of us had plenty of Jeep issues. So, Scott, let's see what was up in your world.
So anybody with a JL or a Gladiator knows the dreaded, hey, ding, your remote start battery doesn't work anymore, and now it can leave you stranded, and certain Konami codes to get you to start your Jeep. Well, the past, because again, I'm driving the LJ one week and the Gladiator the next, and just going back and forth to try and keep both of them. I jumped in the Gladiator a couple weeks ago, like right about when Kevin left, and I got the stop, start, unavailable battery charging. I'm like, oh crud, here we go. But again, 86,000 miles, and we've only had one battery replaced right when we first got it. Mm-hmm. So we just let the system do its job. We let it start and we let it stop, and everyone told us, just let the system work. Just don't keep shutting it off, and so on and so forth. Well, I'm not a fan of the auto start, to be honest with you, but the frustration finally got to me where, again, it started. I noticed the battery charging. I'm pumping 14.9, 14.7 volts into that battery. And I'm like, so I knew it was happening. And I'm like, all right, you know what? I don't care about the stop-start stuff anymore. Sorry, federal government, but, starters are expensive and they're not easy to get to. So I did start doing some research on bypassing it. And there's a quick little trick you can do if you are stranded that will disable the stop-start battery. And there's tons of videos. I'll let you pick the one you want to do. Again, it's up to you because, like, Kevin and I talk about, when you guys sometimes when you do these things, you take your responsibility into your own hands. Now, I know that the way I did it, I can easily put it back on and send the truck for warranty. And it would take me 4 minutes to do, if that.
Oh, okay. So what'd you do?
Well, what I did was basically is I pulled the negative battery terminal off of the small battery, left the positive hooked up, and pulled the number 42 fuse. And what that did is basically it disconnected the auxiliary battery, and now it's running just off the main battery. I don't have start-stop. The light still comes on the dash, but now my voltage has gone down to 14.1 or 13.9.
Which is normal.
Which is normal. Now, there is another way to do it. See, now, when I go to get service done now, I can easily put that negative terminal back on and get to where I'm going.
The battery's dead.
Well, and that's the catch is that most people don't realize if that little battery completely dies, it will start pulling your main battery down.
Yes, it will.
And it will cause you all kinds of. So I kind of just did a Band-Aid fix. But eventually, I'm going to get a little bit larger of a battery, and I'm going to pull because this you have to disassemble everything. I just did not feel like disassembling everything a week before I had to start towing the GPW. I eventually will pull the positive cable up to the top of the battery, the main battery, and then just, again, hook the positive and negative back up to the main battery like the little battery is there. But right now...
Oh, just using the main battery for both functions?
Yeah, well, and then I can just hit the button on the dashboard, and then, it'll turn it off, and that way I don't have to worry about it. So that's the long-term goal. And I will say, so far, it has worked and no problems.
How did you secure the negative terminal so that vibration doesn't bring it back up and bump against the disconnected battery's terminal?
Well,
I'm just curious about that.
Even though it's negative, I wrapped that sucker in tape and some foam, and then I secured it to the I just looped it back on itself and then zip tied it.
So that it can't accidentally make contact, because that could. Bringing that battery into the circuit, particularly dead while you're driving, could have some interesting consequences to the computer.
Yes. And the other thing I found too, and this is another reason why I'm kind of like getting a little anxious, is I found rodent damage. Something has been chewing on. Luckily, it only got the red plastic, the red rubber battery cover, the terminal cover.
Yeah, the terminal cover.
You saw the little 2 teeth marks, and there are little bits down at the bottom. And I'm like, we just had a car at work, rodent damage, $4,000. So I'm like, so now someone. I've read everything from mint to tea tree oil to spread it around. I'm like, I just don't feel comfortable spreading stuff like that on my engine.
Yeah. No.
Some said mothballs. I don't know.
Mint actually is a spider deterrent more than a critter deterrent. It does have some degree of critter deterrent, but you're probably dealing with either mice or rats. It depends on how big the teeth bites were. If they're down in the 16th of an inch, it's probably mice. If it's a little bigger, upwards of 1/8 of an inch wide per tooth stroke, you're talking about little grooves. That's probably a rat, and that's worse because they will do. Well, then their teeth are even bigger as far as width wise, so that's what you can kind of gauge, and it's a guesstimate. The other thing to worry about more than the biting, I hate to tell you, is the urine. Rodent urine. Mice and rats tend to urinate and defecate in their own bedding, and it is highly corrosive. And I'm sure you've seen it in the body shops and that stuff, that they will, what they don't eat, they destroy, several ways. So keep an eye on that. And, hell, if you have to put some rodent packs, the little bait packs, and zip tie them to the side of the frame. They won't last very long when the rain hits, but something, because that's bad juju.
Yeah, the Gladiator set from was 2 weeks that time, and so now I'm almost like every 3 days driving each one, and Kevin knows where it was under that tree, by the driveway.
I was about to say you were parked under that combination palm tree, this tree, that tree, and your neighbors. Yeah, so that's kind of like, and I did catch a squirrel underneath the LJ one day. So I'm like, It could have been,
Yeah, but that
we'll
was
come
only
back to Scott's house, and there'll be rodent traps and snap traps and little bait traps, and it just. I thought there was a Jeep there. It is. It's under all that.
Exactly. Well, that I wish that was the total of my fun and experience, because while all this is going down, I'm driving, of course, the LJ, and I leave work I leave work, and I'm sitting in the light. I'm like, dude, I'm all happy, dude, listen to the radio. And all of a sudden, dude, blah. What the? I'm like, okay, I know the fuel light's going to come on here in a minute, but hold on. Vroom, okay, the light turns green, and I was running on 3 cylinders through the light, and I'm just, I'm like, what the blank is going on here?
You're doing a Mel Gibson there.
Yeah, pretty much. And then so I finally pull.
I'm sorry, Mel Blanc.
Mel Blanc, yeah. I pull into the Wawa gas station, kind of like I'm halfway in, halfway out, and I'm like, all right, what happened? So I'm like, all right, because it started feeling like that crankshaft position sensor. Well, I looked down, and of course, I got a Christmas tree everywhere. So I hit the super chips, and I have like multiple cylinder. I have like 7 codes. Lost communication, multiple cylinder misfire, CAN bus disconnected. You forgot to put quarters in it before you left. The rodent's still chewing on me. Help. I don't know. So I'm like, okay, what do I do? It feels like a crankshaft. And then it did say lost crankshaft position sensor circuit. I'm like, all right, well, let me try this. So I had bought this stupid little 10 millimeter ratcheting keychain from Amazon just as a funny joke. And of course, I don't have any tools because I'm getting ready for, the event coming up. All the tools are packed up in the Gladiator, getting ready to go as roadside repair. So I'm just sitting there going, crud. So I'm like, maybe it fits the crankshaft position sensor. Maybe I can take a look at it. And it fit. I was like, oh, thank you to the man upstairs. This thing works. So I literally got the sensor out, pulled it out, and it was covered in oil. And Kevin knows I've had that rear main seal issue a little bit. So I wipe it off, plug it back in, and fires right back up. I'm like, all right, cool. Was that my problem? I sit there and let it idle, give it a couple of pedals. I'm like, all right, let me go get gas. So I put a couple gallons in, get it back up to the fuel light where it just comes on. And then, I'm joking, people. I'm joking. And then I tried to pull around, and all of a sudden it just died again. I'm like, oh. So this time a young lady in a Gladiator pulled over, and her and myself were trying to push the LJ up a hill practically. Lucky some more bystanders were there to help me. So I pull up, and of course, I'm like, I wonder if my computer finally gave up the ghost, because, again, I was like, I've been doing some testing for Mark also to see if the super chips works, and I was doing a test between the old fuel mileage and new fuel mileage, and with the old computer, and again, bear in mind, I'm only driving 50 miles an hour now. I'm a 15-minute drive to work, the whole 9 yards. And I was getting like 13, something like that, 13.4 or 13.2. I can't remember exactly what I told Kevin in the text message. But long story short is, with the new PCM, I was getting like 14.7, 14.9. Now, again, I'm properly geared, only doing 50 miles an hour, maybe at 2,000 RPM. I got 27 PSI in the tires. Sorry, 32 PSI in the tires. Because, again, I'm trying to get as much as I can out of these fuel mileages just to get and see the numbers. Maybe stacking the deck, who knows. But the point is that I got almost a gallon difference. Well, I was in the middle of doing that testing when my old computer finally decided to leave the chat. Because I texted Mark and said, hey, what about all these codes? And he's like, yeah, is that my computer? I'm like, no, I'm going back and doing the testing. So literally within 6 minutes, it was more time for Autumn to come pick me up, bring me home, and then bring back the computer and tools. In 6 minutes, I plugged everything back up. Boom, all the codes were cleared, and again, runs like a Swiss watch now. I'm so happy. So,
well, first off, they weren't cleared. You took the code record out with the old computer and put a new one in. But yes, well, that's awesome. Well, I'm still running his modified for me, which was playing around with a little bit of the horsepower and shift points, as well as, so, and just to be clear, mine's Gen 2 of his hyping. And Scott's doing a hyped with supposedly scanner readable, because his original reworks to get rid of the weak area, let's call it, in the factory chip made it so that you couldn't really use the aftermarket hyper chip. And what is it you're using?
I use a Trail Dash. I don't use it as a programmer. I use it as just a set of gauges, and it works. It actually works.
That's awesome
with the gauges.
So yeah, and that's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. And given the miles and years and the known issues with the TJ PCMs, you actually, this is weird, folks. Should everybody have a TJ spare computer floating around? Beginning to think yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I'm on my, even if you discount the ones that Wrangler Fixes sent me to be a beta tester, I'm on third possible factory PCM.
Yeah.
so and those were junkyard reflashes. After my original one left the party at probably 90 thou and was unrepairable. So yeah, it's well, congrats for you having the gear and the guts to rip it apart. And it's really scary to take out 3 bolts and 3 plugs or 4. No, you have a manual, so 3.
Yeah, it was 3, but again, it was kind of fun, and I snapped it back on. And again, it's one of those things where, Autumn just kind of laughed. She's like, that's it, and I said, that was it, and she's like, wow, that's disturbing. That's the best way to say it. Like your vehicle can be rendered useless by a computer, and I'm like, well, it's just like anything else.
Every car out there that's computer fired can be rendered useless by a failure of the brain, just like humans can.
Moving on from that subject. But,
yes, yeah.
So a lot of fun's been had lately. That's the important part.
So we get to the big monster in the middle, folks.
Yeah,
and that would be Jeep Beach 2024.
Yeah, no, I think we teased that enough, but
we have.
That was actually kind of fun.
It was a whole different adventure this year. Let's start off with the obvious one. Jeep Beach reorganized and relayed out the event, and for lots and lots of good reasons. But I'm sure there's everybody screaming at us right now. Yes, we're aware there were some challenges, and kind of I would ask you from our own personal view, we have also shared that, and unlike most, we're fortunate here that Scott has some direct access to what's going on. They are trying to do it for our betterment, and so when you make that big of a change, there will be learning curves. So that information has been passed along, and so be it. But the event overall was really, Scott, very nice. And I'm starting off from a normal visitor's perspective. We got there, we got in line. This year, which you'll find out why in a little bit, I was co-partnered with a friend of the show's, and so I want to give a big shout out to Robert and Christy, who tagged along. They actually had 2 Jeeps in the show. So
I just thought of an awesome name.
What's that?
2 Cents Off-Road.
Oh, gosh.
Is that not great marketing genius or what?
That is. Folks, his humor is from the fact that Christy has a copper-colored JK, significantly up-spec, shall we say, and they've named it Lucky Penny. And then Robert took a 97 TJ and blew it completely down to the frame and built it back up with a 6.0, with 1 tons, with all kinds of updates and modifications into a dedicated trail rig. And they had it rhino lined, or excuse me, oh, sorry, Derek, I know you're going to shoot me for that. Line-X'd,
yes,
by brand, in a black textured Line-X inside and out with a copper glitter in it. So they call it Dirty Penny. So you have Dirty and Lucky, and both of their Jeeps at one time or another were part of the Jeep Beach. So they were a lot of fun to take in. And so we will get to the walkarounds and the new products in it, but there was a very awesome reason that Scott went one way and I went another. So I'm going to hand this over to Scott.
Well, one of the things that's very interesting about Jeep Beach is not just the weekend. It is literally an entire week. And as I mentioned earlier about being, the tow pig driver, Autumn and her GPW were invited to be very special guests at a couple events at Jeep Beach. And the first one was the Salute to Heroes. And This was very interesting because, one, I had to learn how to, by myself, trailer
How to
into,
salute? No.
well, that too, trailer into the GPW. And again, so we got the trailer involved, and I will give Autumn the utmost credit. She has never pulled a vehicle on a trailer, and she's never, so let alone doing a 1940s GPW with a stick, no power brakes, and the first gear is where second should be. She jumped in that thing, fired Butch right up, and she got him on the trailer, dead center, perfect first shot.
Awesome.
I was amazed. So I strapped him down, got out there and taken care of it. So we're headed to the Monday Heroes event. Now she was supposed to be parked with the rest of the Heritage military vehicles. So we pull up there, and I want to sideline real quickly. Towing with the Gladiator. Now y'all know I towed an RV with the JK, and I have since told people, stop. Don't do it. It's not safe. I did it, and I can tell you right now, I was stupid. Full on out, I was stupid. So, having said that and experienced that, I got 14 miles to the gallon while towing the GPW. The trailer weighed about 1,500 pounds. The GPW is around 2,200 pounds. So I was about 3,500 pounds in. So I was half of the recommended max weight. And honestly, that's about as far as I would go towing with the Gladiator. I know they can tow 7,000 pounds, but again, I had no problems. It ran fifth gear the entire way. I was doing 55 miles an hour on the way up, and it basically did really good. Again, a good headwind, but again, 14 miles per the gallon. Go ahead.
Let me chime in there for a second, and there's a difference there. Number one, the JK is a shorter wheelbase, and you're pulling a RV trailer, which I know well. And so you have, even though weight-wise, you were probably relatively comparable as far as what you were pulling, the trailer has probably less tongue weight, which makes it more squirrely. The trailer itself, I'm sure, met the balance requirements, but minimally. That's traditional with RVs. And then second of all was the wind. That RV is a sail. I mean, a big trailer. So yes, pulling it with a JK, which is a shorter wheelbase than the Gladiator. Now you move to the Gladiator, and then you put a Jeep on the trailer, and I'm sure I saw your pictures. You're nose forward, which puts the engine weight ahead of the trailer axles and puts the tongue weight up, and gives you a better nose weight on the trailer, so it will trail better. Then, of course, you have a longer wheelbase and a slightly stiffer suspension. So, yeah, you basically pulled correctly with the JT and the flatbed. So, kudos for that.
Yeah, and that's the very interesting thing about all this is, again, experiencing those two things. And the thing I can't stress enough is, again, this is the max I would tow with this. So if you're thinking about getting a Gladiator and you want to tow the 25-foot, RV trailer that weighs 7,000 pounds, I love the Gladiator, but I'm going to tell you, no, get a diesel, get a full-size truck, because this is that 3,500 pounds is that sweet spot. It didn't overtax the engine. It didn't overstress. I had the off-road pages up on the dash so I could see temps, all the T's and P's. And it just felt a lot more planned. Probably for the reasons you were saying, is it felt more secure and I felt safer. But I want to remind everyone something very important, because there was almost a tragedy when we got there. So when we got there, they finally said, hey, stage over here. The other military guys didn't show up. So they're like, hey, why don't you go ahead and park over there by the Mission 22 tent, okay, which was to the left of the stage. It was Mission 22, the SEAL team, and then the stage. And so we pull in, and I proceed to unload the trailer. And I'm going to tell, and Kevin's going to know exactly, because I haven't told Kevin this. This is totally a surprise to him. So here's what I did. Now, I had the tongue flipped upside down because I didn't know how the Jeep would track. So the trailer was up too high, okay?
Nose high.
It was nose high. I solved that when we went on the actual other day, but again, learning curve. So I had the two straps in the back crossed, two straps in the front crossed, use the axle straps, and I had wheel chucks on the front wheels. Okay, one facing front, one facing rear. When I got there, I took the wheel chucks off, didn't put the ramps on, released the rear straps, took them off, luckily set them on the trailer, went to the front, released the driver's side, Autumn standing over there trying to learn where to go to take things from there. Mm-hmm. I released the passenger side strap, and Kevin knows exactly what happened when I did that.
Butch tried to unload himself.
And luckily, he hit the strap and stopped.
Because he's a little lightweight.
It wasn't in gear. The parking brake is iffy.
Yeah.
You know, that was almost bad. And Autumn wasn't in. So I since then, you know, as I'm sitting there, I realized the things you have taught me and everyone else, someone needs to be in that Jeep. The minute you start unloading, someone has to be with their foot on the brake. So as a reminder, Kevin and I talk about what works for us in the heat of a moment. You have to maintain that cool, calm head. You have to maintain, as exciting as everyone's going, oh, that's a really cool Jeep, and you're trying to talk and not focus on what you're doing. I should have said, hey, let me get this off the trailer first, and then we can chat. So as just,
so great, good.
I said that's just a cautionary tale to remind everyone to keep your focus when you're doing something like that.
And the sidebar I'll throw in here is, as scary as it would have been, and heaven forbid if there'd been a pedestrian back there, but the Jeep probably would have survived rolling off the back of a trailer. It's been dropped out of airplanes. They've been flipped off of ships. And there's even a picture of them towing a howitzer during product testing, going over jumps 2 or 3 feet high. Your heart may not have taken it as it rolled off the back edge and went bam and smacked into the ground with the butt end. But the Jeep probably would have just gotten a little dirt going, oh, are we back in the field?
Yeah, Butch would have been like, oh, yeah, waving his cane, let's do this. But the interesting thing is Autumn was petrified that, he wasn't going to start, and, the embarrassment and all this. And, Butch basically kind of said, I want to be part of this. I'm outside the garage. Yay, let's do this. Well, he fires right up. We pull him off, and she pulls next to the Mission 22 tent, and she gets mobbed by the Navy SEALs.
Get mobbed by? Yeah.
And they're like, no, you're parking next to us. And so she kind of pulled in front for a little bit, and they're like, yeah, let's go. No, let's get you over here. So she was parked right next to the razors they use. Yep. The razors are twice the size of the GPW. So these young men and women were over there going, man, great grandpappy told me about these things. I can't believe we won how did we fit in this thing?
You don't, guys.
Yeah. And of course, they helped her put the top up and all that. And they're just having the greatest time. And I got to give credit to this old boy named Skippy. Skippy, he fought in the Vietnam War, and, he was a great guy, fully animated. I'll just say Skippy loves the snacks, and, he's not a young man anymore. And he was going on and on about the stories about this thing. And he's like, man, I wish I could fit it. And Autumn's like, try. He goes, really? I could try? Skippy got in. We almost needed butter to get him out, but Skippy got in. And the smile on that man's face, we made that man's day. He absolutely, completely enjoyed that. And so that's the whole fun thing is the event went off without a hitch. We met some really cool people. And it's interesting. Like Kevin is another bomb I'm getting ready to drop on Kevin is that this young man walked up. And he shook her hand, and he said, hey, this is great what you're doing. Autumn told the story about it's for her dad with, the whole 9 yards. And, and he's like, this is really cool. And how she's trying to honor and all this stuff. And it's really cool. And then Charlene went up on the stage because he kind of said, hey, I'll catch you guys later. Well, Charlene, if you've seen any of the Jeep Beach videos, she's the spokesperson and like the CEO of Jeep Beach. Yep. She's on the beach, and she's like, this is honoring our heroes, and they talk about suicide, and it was a very surreal moment when she introduced one of the members of SEAL Team 6, which was the gentleman we were just speaking to. Yep. So this whole time we're talking to this guy and hearing a little bit of his story. This is a guy that was in SEAL Team 6. Now I don't know where he operated. Obviously, he's not an operator currently, but his mission is to get awareness and the stigma about suicide. And so I'm going to put some show links up for him. But check some of that stuff out because, again, they're doing some good work. And I just think it's very interesting how, like in life, you don't know who you're talking to. You don't know what they're carrying or anything like that. So it was just a really interesting, surreal moment.
It is fascinating because we all have this vision of warriors in their prime and always being in their prime, but they're human beings just like the rest of us. And they come back, and their goal is to normalize themselves back into society. And so there's, well, it's a whole thing that the people you talk to, that old man with a cane being grumpy was possibly a young soldier jumping out of a C-47 Skytrain over Europe, or was wearing a tin can fighting through the jungles of Vietnam, or walking point in the misty rains of Korea. So you can't take them on face value. We all change as we age, but what do you want to call it? The heart of the lion still is there.
Mm-hmm. And it's
So.
The whole evening was just really cool. And this is a really interesting thing. Kevin's going to love this. So when we got home, everything towed fine.
Mm-hmm.
Got him unloaded safely. He got him unloaded safely.
I was going to say your driveway is probably one of the steepest hills in Florida.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, this is the fun thing. We were just getting him inside the garage just because, we wanted him inside the garage. So Autumn turns on the headlights. She's like, I'd never driven him at night with the headlights on. So, of course, she backs up and the headlights are on.
I can see where this is going.
No,
Okay.
She pulls up into the garage, steps on the brake. Guess what works when the headlights are on?
Lights.
The brake lights work when the headlights are on. So the
Awesome.
only way for the brake light to work is if the headlights are on. So if you're driving during the day, you got to guess. but at night, when the headlights are on, brake light works. I was so surprised, but it is such a tiny little bulb. You really can't tell when that thing comes on. You're like, is it on? And I was like, hit the brakes again.
6-volt.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yeah.
holy cow, it does work.
Well, we'll have another story along that line a little later in the show.
Yeah, that's why I meant to tell you that the other night. But everything was really cool. And the getting back to the Heart of the Jeep Beach event, again, we towed him up there again. And Autumn was bestowed an honor. She was a part of the Jeep Beach Village and the Classics. And they called, they had Heritage Row outside where everyone parked, but they also had the inside Heritage Row, if you will, inside the main event. And
so, folks, just to give you the structure, you when you were in the Jeep only parking, which was kind of a new situation, and you went down and you went through a little gate, and it was over by some of the track area, the garages and that stuff that if you ever watch NASCAR, you see them putting all the cars doing the work. And they have a stage there that was kind of a presentation stage. Most of the time there was nothing going on the stage. And you had this little circle of vendors of drinks and foods and munchies. But you had to walk in past this row as you walk down of Jeeps parked crosswise in that area as you entered in. And it was only about, half a dozen Jeeps or something like that, maybe 8 at most.
Yeah.
Of various ages and types. So I'll let you pick up from there.
Yeah, the day.
You got to remember, only a few of us who actually were in Florida at the event to see it. So paint a picture.
Exactly. It's as you walked in, they wanted Autumn's Jeep to be number one.
Number one.
That was the number one Jeep. The first day was Autumn's GPW, a Jeepster Commando, and of course various CJs and YJ. The second day was really cool because it was, of course, Autumn's GPW, and then they had a forward control. I think it was a 54, but it was completely restored except for the fact they put a 3.2 Cummins diesel, which Kevin's, I guess, is an industrial motor, which I was like, okay. Yep. And then, of course, they had the various, CJs and a Comanche. But when you walked in, the first thing you saw was that GPW. And Autumn brought her dad, which is the same age as the Jeep, also a veteran. Yep. And it was
surreal, wasn't it?
It was a very surreal moment. It was very, very. He got all it's hard to put in words. You have a man that, fought in Korea, and basically, as he's sitting there, he's the namesake of the Jeep, and Autumn telling her story. There's just so much going on with that. That was so cool because if you would have walked in and saw this, a lot of people walked up to me and said, hey, this your Jeep? No, a lot of them thought it was Butch's Jeep. but to hear it's Autumn's Jeep and the story, it was really cool. People really resonated with it. And again, as I told Kevin, I heard 100 stories of the military men and women. You know, when they were on base in the 1980s, they had a bunch of these old GPWs out in the field, and they would go out there and try and kill each other as they're doing off-road stunts that they shouldn't have been doing. You know, luckily the couple of their buddies were med tents or were medics and
med techs.
Yeah, did a little side field repair because someone dislocated their collarbone during one event when they were tried doing some off-road and they shouldn't have been doing. But it's fun to hear how, like, just that little GPW brought good memories back for a lot of the men and women. Sorry, I didn't know if you had...
No, you're fine. No, that's fantastic. And it was. And for me, of course, they were honored by that first position when Jeep Beat started, so I didn't know where they were. And I'm walking and going, I wonder where we're going to... Oh, Scott?
And that's where, like we talked about, they were still working some of the kinks out because we were supposed to be over here and over there. Then last minute, oh, you're over here, which is fine. We want to thank Sue and her husband and all the fine staff. Thank you so much for giving us this honor. But there's also a quick little thing I forgot to say. On Monday's event, we met a person from the Bantam Heritage Festival. And turns out they may have known the original owner of this GPW.
Wow.
And, so, well, it's a tight-knit group up there. So he's like, well, what was the person's name? And this whole time, Autumn's been working on this project, we didn't know the person's name. So we went through the notes and found out his name was Sidney.
Okay.
And he went by Sid. And that's important. Every time we took that Jeep out to Jeep Beach, it's like Butch wanted to start. It's like almost Sid was there. And the very first day when we got to drive under the speedway and do all that kind of stuff and drove the long leisurely way, and I got video and I'll post it. We get to the staging area and there was a gentleman from TJK behind us, and his
Jeep crew
and his CJ side chick.
Mm-hmm.
What was very interesting is as I'm sitting there telling about Sid, I look over to Side Chick, and he has Side Chick all over branded on his CJ. The shock, the E had worn off. I look down and I see the word Sid. And I just stopped in my tracks and I pointed to the shock, and the guy got chills. He's like, whoa. I said, yeah. So when we talk about the story of the GPW now, it's Sid started this project 20 years ago when he was 79 years old. Or sorry, he started the project in 2000 when he was 79 years old. Yep. He also was a World War II veteran, because we looked up his obituary. Mm-hmm. He was big in the Model T crowds. He died in 2010 at 89 years old. So this project that he started with lots of love and care has been sitting since 2010 until we got it a year ago, I think, or 2 years ago.
Yep.
And so we are continuing his work and refreshing some of the stuff that just sat, because unfortunately this Jeep sat outside for a while.
Yeah, and there are some challenges, but they're slowly being overcome, and that's a big job Autumn's taking on. More power to her.
Mm-hmm. So that's why we started, telling a little bit of Sid's story too. We found that to be important because again, like Autumn, and I'm big on. I'm not stolen valor. I will not say we did not serve. She wore an Army hat for her dad, and everyone's like, "Did you serve?" She goes, "No, my dad did, and this is why." And at the same time, we're not going to take credit for Sid's work. We want to make sure he gets credit because this was his project. This was his baby. Again, with all the receipts and all the notes he had. So I just want to take a few minutes out to say that we're kind of acknowledging the past while bringing things into the future. And the second day of the event, again, it was just, I'm very proud of my Jeep community. Mm-hmm. I really am, just as a whole, because everybody walked up. No one was snarky. No one was rude. Everyone, they had questions. And when Autumn didn't know the answer, she's like, well, I'll have to research it, And she heard a lot of the same stories over and over again about the Jeeps and the crates and why it has 9 slots. But the Jeeping community as a whole was very, very, very welcoming to both Butch, the person, and the GPW. So it was just kind of fun to see all that amalgamation of just history, camaraderie, thank you for the service, that kind of thing. I'm really proud of the Jeeping community. I could go 1,000 days for thanking people, But again, mostly just, again, a big thank you to Sue, Paul, and also James and Judy for the food. Thank you, by the way, Jeepers of Daytona, because one of the biggest things we didn't even know they were actually having an award for the Autumn One oldest Jeep. So we weren't even expecting that. So that was a really nice, acknowledgement, if you will. So we're hoping to be back. A lot of the questions and comments people had, I forwarded to the friends I made and said, hey, these are some of the things. So when I talk to the Jeep Beach community, if you went to Jeep Beach, they are absolutely looking for feedback, but constructive feedback. Don't just, oh, well, it sucked, this and that. That doesn't help. Kevin brought up, I'll let Kevin talk about his observations, but he had great observations. And of course I passed those on because they were insightful and they were ways to help improve it. So again, it all in all, it was a great event. I was floored just by everything. And I wish I would have got more time to go see the vendors, but next year's a different year, and I'm planning to take the entire week off. I've already put work on notice, and they kind of laughed. They're like, okay, yeah, sure, So next year I will be volunteering, and I will be there full time, and I can't wait to see the rest of the event. So that was my take on it, Kevin. That's a tale of two Jeeps. So how about you, Kevin? How was your adventure?
Well, mine was a little more like most time, walking around, talking to the vendors, looking for new products that I thought would be interesting to our listenership, things that people might want. Yes, there was plenty of the regular stuff going on, from the most, well, let's just show them Jeep Hut, who is kind of like the supermarket for Jeep parts, and they were well stocked and well attended, which was fantastic, and tire vendors, and a lot of the things that we're all used to, a lot of competition for different upgrades. Metal Cloak was there having their flex table, which was fantastic to see Corey and Jesse again, and the rest of the crew, and you had to get your Metal Cloak t-shirt. That was kind of like mobbed every year. There were some interesting standouts that I will throw out there. Number one, in the for those that like your audio, Alpine, they're a pretty big name in audio gear. Well, they showed up in full force with displays, with their trailer system, and some great products. And more than that, Alpine actually sent, let's see, I've got to read names here. Sorry, folks. Colin Vargo, he is the brand specialist for Alpine out of New York, Metro New York. And the man knows his stuff incredibly well, and was talking about things that could be done all the way back into TJs and YJs with their state-of-the-art gear. And it impressed, as I mentioned, I was there with Robert and Christy. Robert made a purchase of significance to upgrade Lucky Penny. And the products are great. I got no problem with Alpine at all. But the knowledge and the willingness to send somebody of that smarts, put it simply, was really fascinating. And that was kind of carried through, but they were an exemplary example of that kind of support that they were granting the Jeeping community. And then, of course, we had the people who were selling other stereos who, instead of showing what you could do with it, like normal people, some of the audio sailors were just like, okay, if you're not going to walk over here, I'm going to blast you out from 3 rows away.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry, that was a little bit of a downer, but that happens every year, so that's nothing new.
Yeah.
Another neat thing is I did see a new product from a company called Armorlight. Now, I know everybody likes to, well, I shouldn't say this, but a lot of people like to strip the interior out and Line X or coat or Raptor line yourself. And then you suddenly realize, my passenger's over there going, why do I smell melting, plastic shoes or roasting leather? Or, well, that's where the cats are for your Jeep if you haven't illegally removed them. But I put this floor down, and I don't want to. Well, Armorlight and David Ladd was a nice guy to talk about with me. They make a neat product, and it's something new I've seen. It looks like a carpet kit, except that the backer's already bonded to it. It's already punched out for drain holes and that stuff, and it slides in.
Sweet.
Now you can pull the console out and tuck it if you wish, but they had multi-pieces pre-molded and formed, and I've never seen that before. You know, I have the aluminized insulation, you know, bitumen insulation for sound and heat, and then I run a bed rugs system in it, which is a great system. I love it, and it's relatively easy to take in and out, but it's not exactly drop in, drop out. This stuff is thicker, more soft. I mean, and the surface looks like you already have some kind of a mat in there, but it isn't. It's all molded into the system. And the acoustics were fantastic. The thermal was fantastic. And the fact that it's removable. So you can have your stripped out trail Jeep, and then you get home, and when nobody's looking, you can slip in your floor liners and be back to actually comfortable in driving and hear yourself think.
We won't tell anybody.
So, you know, if you check it out, it's just Armor Light, and they're at armorlight.com, I believe. And it's really seemed to be durable. They're molded to fit, so they even had your LJ back ends, so you could buy the front seats. Sweet. You can buy it in sections, you know. And I was like, imagine if you've got a floor system that you can simply pull out and hose off. That's what this is. So it's a neat new product. And I have no comments on durability and that stuff, but it looked like a well thought out system. So that was a worthy look. As I'm looking through my notes and stuff here, I guess I got to go to the big one right now, which was unusual. And I mean, I know I'm kind of light on the stuff, but most of the stuff we've talked about before, and they were, you know, every one of the vendors was back with an interesting missing, Scott. I didn't see anybody with things like axles and actually, you know, big suspension components.
Really?
There were vendors there that were fronting for them, you know what I'm saying? But even Metal Cloak only brought literature. And I wonder if that's a change in the mentality of the program. Jeep Beach is more about the social aspect of Jeeping as opposed to the actual trail ride. But I'm seeing a shift that way. So it's kind of interesting that it wasn't there. There was plenty of T-shirts, my heavens, where every other booth had T-shirts and bangles and keychains and paraphernalia. But there was a little less of the meat of off-roading, if you know what I'm saying. So that was unfortunate. You know, Raceline was great. But what I will say is Raceline, who we have a relationship with to some degree, not a sponsor, but just friendship, was there, and they had their usual rims set up, and that's actually where Dirty Penny was sitting as a display unit, complete with its mud from the last trail ride and a crack through the front steering after you know, some wear and tear that had to be fixed on the way home, or not brought home to be fixed. And but there was more of a plethora of the other side of Jeeping, which is the show Jeeping. There were the 22-inch rims all over the place at other vendors. There was, you know, their tire guys were there. That's fine. But, you know, overall, more show, less go for this year. Now, is that really the case, or is it just because of the new layout? I don't know. Well, I walked it all twice. So it was a good turnout, though, I will say that. Now, here's the other flip. And this one, we will actually have somebody on the show with if scheduling works out, next show, even if we have to do a separate recording and bring back. But I met a gentleman in the parking lot doing something that initially was rather sketchy looking. He was walking around to all the parked Jeeps, or appeared to be all the parked Jeeps, and was reading VINs. Didn't know that at first. It looked like he was just peering in over windshields or looking at door jambs. And he had a laptop with him. And apparently it was a laptop with a cell connection. And I mean, I'm sorry, I'm nosy. I'm like, what you up to? And he was actually smiling. He walked over and he said, hey, I'm Matt. And he says, believe it or not, I'm looking at VINs and running a check against the National Traffic Safety Administration recalls on the Takata airbags. And I'm like, oh, he says, you know about that? I said, yes, my wife's car fell under that and we had it, the service. Oh, so you had it serviced. That's great. Folks, it turns out that the JK series, and I'm not all JKs, but a big chunk of the JKs have Takata airbags in them. Those are the airbags. If you have been living under a rock for the last 3 or 4 years, the Takata airbags have a recall. They were exploding rather than inflating. Mm-hmm. And Matt is a representative, believe it or not. It's sad to say that there's someone who has a job that is, he is the regional manager at TakataAirbagRecall.org, trying to get out there and find people who haven't taken advantage of the free recall.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, Jeep owners are some of the worst. And I'm not going to steal his thunder because I want to get him on the show because he had a message to send, but he will tell you things like 42 people have died. Yeah. That doesn't include the number of people that have been maimed or injured by these defective airbags. And we in the Jeep world, unfortunately, tend to have a cavalier attitude, like it won't happen to us. Yeah. We wouldn't be a wheeler if we did that kind of thing. Yeah. So we're going to get him on the show. He's going to tell you how, because you may have bought a used Jeep and go, well, is it mine? And he'll tell you the way. The thing I do want to get out there is, folks, if you have gotten a recall letter, even if you've lost it, go on the NTSB, National Transportation and Safety Board site, or just Google airbag recall. You will find links that let you simply do something really tough. Go out and read your VIN, your door jamb, your window, your registration, pick one of them, type in your number, and it will say, yes, you're in the recall, or not, you're fine. And if you're in the recall, you know how much it costs you to get your Jeep airbag replaced? Nothing. And I can speak from firsthand, not for the Jeep, but for my wife's automobile, which is a very expensive one with the little 3-pointed star.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do want to touch on a little base because I do know because this actually was a question brought up to me on a similar situation. Oh, I don't want to bring my Jeep to the dealership, because, you're going to do my airbag and it's just a ploy to get me in there to sell me something I don't need. No, this is a serious
federally mandated.
Yeah, it's free to you. It's free 99. Okay, if it's free, if it's free, it's for me. Because again, are they going to want to do a 21-point inspection? Of course, we're all in business to make money. But you can say no, thank you, and move on. No, you don't owe them anything. It's going to take an afternoon of your time, maybe you get a free cup of coffee and a bottle of water, and use their Wi-Fi to download all the movies you want. I don't know. The point is that, or you can just leave it, and sometimes we'll do shuttle buses. Take advantage of the recall, because as Kevin will attest to, when these airbags inflate, I've had an airbag inflate into me, and I don't want shrapnel. I don't want to face a Claymore mine in my steering wheel. You know,
and that's kind of what the issue is. Matt was rather poignant. He has a survivor of that who authorized him to be allowed to use her medic picture at the crash site. It's not pretty.
Yeah.
Okay. But this individual survived. So, no, this is a serious issue, folks. And I know we tend to be glib and happy a lot of the time, but come on, jeepers, it's a free repair. Mm-hmm. But we'll get Matt on hopefully before the next show here, and talk to him and let him tell you point blank all the information, because it's fascinating to talk to him. That's about it on my Jeep Beach wrap up. We had a great time. We went down to great restaurants. We met hundreds, I have to underline, hundreds of great Jeepers, and chatted on every subject imaginable. We were out on the beach during some of the beach drives. There was one that was kind of bizarre. A subgroup kind of deliberately dug a quick ditch, Scott.
No.
Well, not a ditch, but a trench, a slot trench in line with your wheels. And you could easily straddle it or go around it if you were going along, but they were just egging people on to, and couldn't pass it up because, of course, I'm running my quote unquote little TJ with 33s.
Right.
And I had watched a couple of guys with larger tires in front of me, get in there and then, having to back up and having to, and I'm going, and Susan's looking at me. She goes, "You're not, are you?" I said, "Yep, I am." She goes, "You're going to put it in 4-wheel drive?" I said, "Nope, hubs aren't locked anyway, so it doesn't matter." All I did was punch the rear locker, hit it at about 5 miles an hour, and she went down nose in, and she came right back out of it, and then the rear end went down, and I got a cheering ovation from them.
Nice.
Here, the little TJ does it.
Yeah.
So that was a little bragging. Sorry, folks. But it's like, it's about knowing what your Jeep can do. Mm-hmm. And in sand, momentum is king.
Yeah.
So anyway, I guess that's about it. It's a lot of fun for me, but Scott, I think, has something he wants to add.
Well, real quickly, I don't know if yes, if anybody goes on Facebook, yes, a Jeep did catch fire. No one got hurt. Nope. On the beach. And so it's just one of those things where, again, Kevin and I reiterate, we don't know if they had a fire extinguisher. We don't know if they used it.
That was written up that there was a fire extinguisher available or something, and something didn't work, but, it got out of control.
Yeah.
So obviously I'd have to say there was a fuel leak, and because the flames look like that kind of classic gasoline fed, so don't know anything else about it other than, I saw the pictures too, and I was like, yeah, that was awful close to my hotel.
Yeah, well, that's why, again, we safety first, people. Jeeps can be replaced, you cannot. So,
correct. And
again, the Volusia County Sheriff's Office said they had no major events, no major injuries to report. Mm-hmm. Everyone behaved themselves. A lot of people were still, because they were writing noise ordinance tickets, but some people would say they missed their area. But again, it's one of those things where it's just, again, I'm really proud of the Jeepers because, again, Volusia County is my home now. I live in Volusia County. Yep. And the police don't mess around. And knowing that, that we upheld our bargain and were very civil to the community, that was great, because you're not allowed to have the truck week here anymore. Like they banned the truck week because of the unruly behavior. So thank you, Jeepers. I really appreciate you guys and gals just putting your best foot forward and having a good time, and no one got hurt.
Yeah,
that's the cool part.
Well, I guess because you're into the what I want to call it, Pat Jeepers on the back mode there. Mm-hmm. But let's slide backwards a little bit. I'm going to roll the clock back, and I'm going to take us into the garage because I had some interesting challenges
Kevin
pop up.
Had interesting challenges.
And that was in preparation for Jeep Beach. Now, honestly, they were time crunches because of me. My fault is... You guys know it wasn't that long ago, about 6-7 months ago, that my wife and I and Slightly Altered took a train trip together and then drove the rest of the way up into Pennsylvania and visited the Bantam Heritage Jeep Festival, which I recommend to anybody. It was an incredible event, and particularly you, Scott, because I got to figure out how to get Butch up there.
Yes.
But anyhow. And when I say things are my fault, is that, well, I waited till the week before Jeep Beach to.
Hey, you got no. You're not taking my yearly, leave the parts on the shelf for a year and then do them. That's my gimmick.
No, I didn't leave any parts on the shelf.
Okay.
I didn't even. I've been driving the Jeep, as is, but I'm figuring, I'm getting ready to drive across the state of Florida. And before everybody goes, oh my God, another long trip. No, Florida's only 2 hours wide, even at the wide points. But still, okay. I don't want to be the Jeep on the side of the road dead. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. And so I said, well, let me go ahead and do the annual maintenance on the front hubs. for those that are listening new and don't know the history, slightly altered, has a custom front axle complete with original worn manually locking hubs. And you go, okay, what's that got to do with it? Well, locking hubs go on old style hub itself, the wheel hub, which is not a unitized bearing assembly that you're all thinking of. And yes, Jeeps have had those since the YJ time. But before that, you actually had hubs with separate bearings, an inner bearing and an outer bearing that you had to take out once a year and clean and grease, and then replace the seals if they were worn. It was a regular annual maintenance. Once a year isn't bad to have the ability to unlock your hubs and not have every piece of drivetrain dragging. At least that's my personal opinion.
Yeah.
And it's done very well, except that every once in a while, like, has it really been a year? Gee, I think I ought to do something about that. Well, this year, it opened up a few cans of worms, more than one, in fact. So I pull off the passenger side to start with, because that's been the side of my Jeep that seems to keep acting up. And it boils down to about 5 years ago, I spun a bearing, which destroyed the spindle that the drive shaft comes through. And I replaced it and all these other fun things. Well, unbeknownst to me, apparently I must have damaged the hub. Well, I pulled that off and I'm cleaning everything up, and wait a minute, this isn't right. The inner bearing, which is the large one that carries most of the weight, the race in the hub that you're supposed to drive in with a driver, was spinning with my fingers. This is not good, folks. You want the bearing to rotate, not the bearing race to rotate. That tends to make things hot, destroys grease, eventually leads to a fire, wheel taking its own vacation separate from you, those kinds of little challenges.
Why did you leave me, loose wheel?
Pretty much. But of course, I'm 4 days away from Jeep Beach.
Yay!
What's the delivery time on a replacement hub, regardless of the fact that it costs, something north of $300?
Yeah. Imagine all that gas you saved.
Yeah. So I'm into researching, and lo and behold, I stumble across a product that I kind of was aware of, but not in the form and usage for a wheel hub. And everybody's heard of the brand name Loctite.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, most of the time, Loctite, and yes, all of you guys in the engine rebuilding world are shouting at me going, we know. Well, the rest of us all don't. But Loctite manufactures a line of what are considered industrial grade products. And there's two different kinds of bearing and seal retainer for moving parts. And I was like, interesting, because the rest of the Loctite line is about locking fastener tight.
Mm-hmm.
But in a rolling situation, you want to lock only one bond, but the other has to be free to be greased and turned. So if you picture in your mind that, okay, I got a bearing race, which starts about 1/8 inch thick and goes to about 3/8 of an inch thick at the back. It's tapered, and it has to let the inside part spin, but the outside can't. And you usually do that by having an interference fit between the race and the item that it's being tapped into, which I no longer had. And Loctite makes a product. Fortunately, it was carried in stock, in two forms, one that goes up to 5/1000ths of an inch of gap, and the other one that goes to 15 thousandths. Now, and 15 thousandths is your gap, and when you're dealing with a circle, that means 15th on both sides. You have up to 30 thousandths gap filling ability.
Yeah.
And it sets up, folks, to over 3,000 PSI. And
Nice.
big warning says, you will probably need to heat this part to over 500 degrees to get it back out.
Right.
So I will tell you, it's called Loctite Green, and some of you may have heard of it and some of you may not. I would not use this stuff liberally nor randomly. You want something that basically is equivalent of nailing, screwing, gluing, whatever, something together to never come apart again. I fully am ordering a new hub now that I have time, and will replace it. And the old hub and bearing will probably go on the shelf as a trophy of stupidity on my part. To remind myself that, yeah, you need to look a little closer sometimes. But I will tell you that the product seems to have worked wonderfully. You clean, and you can't be too clean. So I buy brake clean by the case, and I probably finished off a can and a half just cleaning this up. I did use a new bearing, and what you do is this stuff comes in a chapstick-like tube, and it is, green. And you wear gloves. It tells you wear gloves because it's probably not real good for human consumption either, or absorption, or whatever. Scott's here having a giggle fest.
No, I'm like, is that a third ear growing off your forehead?
Yeah, that's kind of what you feel about it. And you have to coat both parts, and it's kind of its consistency is a lot like chapstick, a little softer, but
Yeah.
And then you have to, what do they call it? You must fixture the part, which means fixturing means get it into its position and hold it there. And hold it for 24 hours is what's recommended. A minimum of an hour, it said, minimum of an hour to get set. And then, but you're not supposed to have grease or oils or anything like that. See, I didn't really want to put it together on the hub. On the spindle itself. So I figured out, I went over to my little hand press. I've got a 3,000 pound Dake number 3 hand press, which is the little gear rack with the arm that you can squeeze things without hydraulic pressure. And the more you weigh, the stronger it is. And so I was able to put the hub on a block of wood, point it up, put the actual bearing install tool, which you tap in and then it would fall in this case, and leave it sitting there, and then bring the spindle arm down. And then I balanced about a 25-pound chunk of railroad rail that I have that I use as an anvil on that arm.
Nice.
To act as a pressure weight. And the idea there, folks, is to, you've got a bearing seat that's, you don't want to have the bond hold the bearing race out. You want it to go down on its seat hard, but then it fills around the edges. And so I stacked all that thing up, put the press on, and walked away for an hour. Forced myself to go do something else. Meanwhile, slightly altered looks like a poor puppy that's got a hurt paw, left up, hanging open there. And I will tell you, initial assumptions is it worked well. After an hour, I pulled it back off, and had read some tech data that recommended you go in and make sure that you clean up any squeeze out, so that it didn't, because it gets hard and it doesn't get back into your grease and mess up your bearings. So I got in there after an hour, which means it's not cured, but it's firm, and gently took the edge of a razor blade inside the bore and cleaned up until I had a nice clean surface. Didn't use any spray. I waited till the next day, 24 hours later, to spray down and clean it up again. Packed my bearings, put it all back together, and basically my tolerance on my wheel went back to 0, the way it was supposed to be, and stayed there.
Sweet.
Which was very, very nice. So I'm very impressed with that Loctite material. I actually bought the thinner stuff too. It's not to be used casually. It is, you need to know that you need that gap filling. Is it ideal? No, honestly not. Particularly not on a steering spindle, but I will be ordering a new hub and replacing it. And at that point, I'll let you know, because I'll take it apart and I'm going to clean it up and just see if it's bonded in there that well.
Yeah.
But that's probably going to be a little bit, I've got to pay off some hotel bills and some travel bills for the last bit of time. But it's an interesting product. So if you have a loose fit, now this is not rattling loose. This is something moves when it shouldn't move, that there is a product. And I do know that it shows up on at least my Napa's shelf. Now, the Napa I use has it's not a regular just automotive Napa. It's an industrial Napa.
Yep.
That has truck parts and, equipment parts. And so that may be a little different in your neighborhood, but you can look it up under the Loctite brand, and it's kind of a neat product. just make sure you don't just glob it on and push it down and say, oh, it's good enough. No, you have to go through a little bit of a process to make sure that the part is sitting where it's supposed to line up and sit. Otherwise, you'll actually cause problems. So kind of a neat one on that. Along with that, though, I'm opening up the Jeep, and as I disassemble and I look down and I see that horrid thing that shows up on a lot of TJs, the bevel-worn brake pads, that are thicker at one end and thinner at the other, which is telling you that your calipers are skewed or your rotor's running off true, both of which could have been happening in my place. So I do my usual. I start digging things and looking things. Are my rails on the caliper mount crooked? Is this? And I started thinking, wait a minute. And I go and I grab the bolt. You have two bolts that hold your caliper on, right?
Yep.
And I look at it and I go, and it caught my eye. So I cleaned it off and I looked at it again. And mine were the anodized bolts that had the kind of yellow finish on them, Scott. I'm sure you've seen them in the parts store a lot of time, the anti-rust coating. Well, that was on the head. That was on the threads. But the sleeve area in the middle was shiny chrome. Yeah. And I'm like, how loose are these? So I walk over to the caliper, and there is a sleeve that's pressed in that rubber bushing that they float on. And I put it in there, and you literally could make it ring like a maraca. Oh. Okay.
Found
it.
I've
got the bearings working. Who has a pin and bushings set for a TJ in stock and fortunately, that's a fairly common part that nobody ever thinks to replace. Do you, folks?
Nope.
Who else out there has pulled the bolts out, taken the caliper off, put it back on, and put the bolts back in, right?
Yeah.
I'm guilty too. I'm guilty too, folks. I pushed out the steel pins, looked inside of most of them, and they had ridges worn into them, the shape of the bolt from the pressure. The caliper tries to move with the wheel when you hit the brakes. Every time you do that, and you're like, well, that's not much. Well, over the life of an 06 to today with, all the miles, it is. Yeah, it is. And for probably less than $30, I got new sets for both sides. The hardest thing is after you get the old rubber sleeves out, getting the new ones in, because they don't want to go in. And but I took a wire, I don't know what you call them, but the cleaners that go inside pipes and things like that, the little spiral brush, wire brush, and I ran them in and out of the bores to get the bore area clean and put a little bit of brake grease. And folks, when you're putting those together, use a specific the different brands of the high temperature brake grease made for those slides that doesn't pull in dust. And you kind of fill a little bit inside that rubber sleeve, and then you smear it all over the tubes, the sleeves, the rubber sleeves. Then you put the steel sleeves in, and they're going to fight you a little bit to get in because of the ridges. You put them back in, and then you put the new bolts, and you put a little grease on, not the threads, but the actual slide. And it's amazing when you drop that thing on with new pads and the bolts go in and they don't wiggle. And you go out and you stop, and the Jeep stops in a straight line. It doesn't pull to the right. It doesn't pull to the left. It stops in a straight line. So sometimes it's the little parts that you don't think of that you're like, oh, they're fine. You need to look a little bit closer. And I'm guilty of that. And it's funny because I fix a lot of other people's Jeep, but it's like they said, the cobbler kids have no shoes.
Yeah.
The
carpenter's house needs work. The the roofer's house leaks.
Yes. And so I'm sitting here feeling very embarrassed with myself, but happy now that the Jeep actually drives. It steers right. It stops right. It's like, hey, this is a novel concept.
No, that's awesome.
And there's other sides to it too, folks. When you get everything tight like that, your tires wear evenly, and you don't have the rounded corners of the chopping, and it's amazing. And for those of you out there going, yeah, well, that's why I have a unitized bearing. Guess what? You can't feel the wear in a unitized bearing, but you can test it. If you jack up your Jeep, put it on a jack stand, one side at a time's fine, and take a piece of lumber and get underneath it and wiggle it. Now, people will say, oh, it's moving. It must be ball joints. Well, make sure it's not the wheel bearing.
Yep.
So you may need a second person to look at it from the side, and you may see that the C joint, everything's still there, not moving. And then you look over, well, but the tire is. And if the ball joint, okay, your brake assembly isn't moving, it's your wheel bearing.
Mm-hmm.
So, they do not last forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's just a word to the wise that even though some of us supposed to know what's going on, sometimes we get a little complacent looking the other way.
Mm-hmm. Turn the radio up a little bit.
Turn the radio up a little bit and learn to, as you hit the brakes, to put the little bit of input into the steering wheel the other way, because it's going to pull to the right, and so you steer to the left. And we're all guilty of that.
Oh, yeah.
Another short pre-Jeep Beach situation, and this was a classic one, not in that it was anything earth-shattering, but it's more about a learning experience for friends, self-included. And that is, I was talking to a friend of mine, and he was going over to do some volunteer work. Jeeper, a very nice couple, older couple, but still, they had an 05, and it was, for some reason, out of the blue, the tail lights and turn signals had quit working. But the marker lights were still functioning on all corners. All right. So you kind of go, oh boy, that's one of those that let's take a look see.
Yeah.
And went over, and it had already been opened up and started when I got to give him a hand, because when you're doing what I call long electrical searches, i.e. from one end of the vehicle to the other, it's kind of tough. I don't know about you guys, but my arm span's only about 5.5 feet. And if I'm holding probes in both hands trying to do a circuit continuity beyond that, it doesn't work so well. Plus my long set of voltometer leads, which is the device used to check continuity and resistance and volt, etc., somehow grew legs and walked away, and I haven't replaced them yet.
Oh, man.
So,
oh, man.
Yeah, it happens. So I said, look, I'll give you a hand, because that way the two of us could work together as a tag team. And we got started, and immediately I was like, why are we digging in the middle? And my rule of thumb is you start from one end to the other. You can either start at the lights or the fixture at the end and work towards the battery, or you can start at the battery and work the other way. We had the wiring diagrams, and we ultimately decided let's start at the back, because when you saw this Jeep and you looked at the condition, it had seen some pretty fair use and abuse. And so we started the lights and we check. And I said, first off, I could tell it had those little guards around the tail lights. And so I was in the lenses, the screws, you're like, those screws haven't turned in it. Let's just make sure that we don't have burned out bulbs, because it's kind of suspicious that you don't have brake or turn, which is the same filament, but you do have marker, which is a different filament. And so that ruled out the ground issue. Then we knew it had to be grounded, but let's open it up and look. And sure enough, one of the two bulbs was burned out. So, okay, let's put another one in and see if that fixes that one. Nope. So we look and we start doing, I said, okay, let's start doing continuity checking, because there is the Y comes under the back of the Jeep. And I have a Pierce probe. And by the way, when you use a Pierce probe, folks, afterwards use liquid electrical tape to seal the hole, or you're going to introduce corrosion. Please, please, please. And I don't like using it until I know I have to, but we actually end up deluming the entire run from the back of the Jeep to the front that runs along the driver's passenger in the TJ series, and it also is in the YJs and the CJs. They put the body harness in the body rather than under the body, other than the engine side. So they were trying to make it last. A long story short, we worked our way all the way up to the front, even broke the coupling between the back body harness and the main harness blocking, which is by the driver's left footwell. And all we succeeded in doing, it seems minor, but it's actually very important, is that everything's fine. I could take the power probe and I could turn on the taillights. I could turn on, make them glow. But now I had to figure out, why weren't they getting power from the system? Was there a problem with the brake switch? Was there a problem with, power in? Was there a problem with the multifunction turn signal switch? All of the above. And that's not as easy as you think, as you kind of have to start.
Mm-hmm.
Well, a mistake was made in the initial review. And that was starting, the guy I was working with was, well, we got power up here. And okay, I was like, that's cool. He was showing me that, we're checking that we've got 12 volts and going into the multifunction switch. And we check on the backside and we got 12 volts going into the brake light switch. And okay, well, that's good. Are we getting brake light circuit out of the brake switch? And he said, yep, we can show that. All right. And this is how you chain feed. And then we looked over and we checked the lead back at the junction point. Do we have 12 volts there when we're using these things? And the answer was nope.
Bum, bum, bum.
So, okay, we go back looking at the diagram, and lo and behold, everything runs through the multifunction switch. That's the switch on the left that you guys think of that, is your turn signals. Turn signals are on the right. I'm sorry, but it's basically the stalk side of the on your left that controls everything. So yeah.
It's turn signal.
Anyway, right or left? My brain's a little turned around here.
No, you had it right. Left side is turn signal, headlamps, and all that.
Right. And so and we were checking the output at that switch. And it was not working. But if we plugged everything back in and took the turn signal switch plug out and fed it from there, I could make the lights work with the power probe.
Okay.
And looked at each other, and it was like, the multifunction switch is gone, which I can tell you that mine went too. And so at that point we stopped and we searched because Jeep Beach was coming up in a couple of days for this guy. He wanted to make it, and he didn't have lights. He wasn't going to drive across, the state with no brake lights or turn signals, which I commend him for.
Yes.
So lo and behold, we find the steering stock assembly. There's 3 different versions, folks, for a TJ, so don't just go nuts. Make sure you get your right year and right model. If you have fog lights, factory or not, it makes a difference. If you have cruise control, factory or not, it makes a difference. So, but they had the right one. It was about $80, but they had it in stock. So we come running back with it, and I looked at the guy I was working with, and I said, so, you feel lucky or not? He goes, no, I'm going to plug it in. We're going to test it. I said, okay, good news. And we plugged in the brand new switch, and I walked to the back and I said, okay, hit it. Nothing.
Sorry.
He's been waiting a long time to use that button.
Yes, I have.
And at which point, the guy I'm working with is like explicative. And I was, admittedly, I should have said something to him, but I said, well, and I walked into the building where we were working. There was a computer there that I knew stayed logged on. And I went into the website that I know where to find stuff like this. And I pull up the wiring diagram, and I finished the job that we didn't finish before we assumed and bought the part. And that was all the way to the battery. And I started going and I said, okay, here's the multifunction switch page, which is a little bit of a squiggly pile of lines.
Right.
But I look up and I see, okay, there's the one that goes to that fuse. That's the 12 volt. Wait, there's another line here. And I followed it up, and that one goes to a different fuse. The multifunction switch has 2 powers.
Interesting.
There's one from a smaller fuse that's control power. That's what goes to the brake switch and goes to the like of those things. And by the way, feeds the marker light circuit.
Ah.
Oh. And then out in the PDA or PDU or whatever you want to call it, I call it the under the fuse box, fuse 27. And I walked out and opened the hood, and let's see if fuse is not there. Explicative. I didn't even say anything at that time. I turned on my heel, walked out to my parts, dug through my bag, found my box of fuses. I have a very large box of fuses because when you play with Jeep electrical, you will pop more than a few. And dig up the right size, 20 amperes. All right, walk back in, plug it in, and I said, step on the brakes or hit a turn signal. We have lights. And of course, everybody's going, oh. And the guy I was working with was like, I have to know. I said, fine. Because, unfortunately, the friend that we were working for is just out $80 on we didn't finish the analysis. And we plugged the old switch back in. And sure enough, we had brake lights and turn signals to speak of. But it was clear the multifunction switch was not working right.
Yeah.
They were dim to the point you had to cup your hands around the light bulbs to see the light. Yet if we put the new unit in, it was working. And I looked over at the, let's call him the client, even though he wasn't paying for this. I said, I'm sorry, but I think you need to keep the new unit. Your old one is either corroded internally or you have broken contacts. And while I can tell you it's technically working, it's not working correctly.
Yeah. You may blow the fuse and be in a world of hurt later.
And that was it. And he agreed to that. But we don't know why the fuse was missing. Maybe the old turn signal stock, the multifunction switch, had actually blown the fuse and somebody pulled it out to go check it out. It is actually labeled MFSA. Is what in little microscopic text in the fuse box is listed. Multifunction switch assembly.
Okay.
And it was probably legible at one time back in 2005 when the Jeep was made.
Yeah.
At this point, I'm looking at what looks like hieroglyphs, in little tiny, we're talking 16th inch high text.
Looks like if Scott wrote it.
Yeah, because pieces are missing and scraped and whatever.
Yeah.
But the long story of this that brought to a close, folks, is follow through. If you're running a test procedure, particularly on electrical, and it's any vehicle, but in Jeeps, follow it through, read the, and look at the wiring diagrams. And it's okay. Jeep is notorious for splitting power. I'll just tell you that right now. And I knew it, and I got enthralled with the idea, and I believed it when we had power, But the point is that they're very, I'm sure they have a logic to it between having control power on a smaller fuse, so that if the brake light switch shorts out, it just pops a 15 or a 10 ampere or something like that,
Yeah.
And then the heavy side, if you want to call it that, to the devices. And not that brake lights and turn signals are really heavy, but I will tell you, turn signals put more of a load than you think because of the switch clicking on and off and on and off, and that's a surge to the circuit. But you have to go through it. And I'm not saying that every circuit is dual fed from two different sides. I'm just saying that you kind of have to follow through. And the rule of thumb for electrical, for those of you that are delving into tracing your own stuff, it's best to go, I don't care whether you go from the end of the circuit that's not working, but go all the way back to the battery terminal, and then turn around and look at the diagram and make sure there's not another path from the battery to somewhere else.
Oh, yeah.
So I throw that out there as a second time in one show that Kevin's going to say, well...
What's your favorite saying when it comes to electrical? Test, don't guess. Or was that someone else's favorite saying? I can't remember which one.
Well, it's somebody that I follow and watch and
it's a good saying.
Learn. It's a great saying. Test, don't guess. And the other way to put it is test, don't assume.
Yeah.
Because you know what happens when you assume.
Mm-hmm.
You make you and me.
I was hoping you wouldn't say it because now I got to edit it out.
No, you can just bleep out that one word.
Yeah. Taking a picture.
So, anywho, with that, for those of you who listen to the show for tech, there's a couple of real life oops, and they weren't free. Fortunately, you don't feel as guilty knowing that the component that you had your client, customer, friend, etc. replace, it really probably didn't need to be replaced. But in the technical definition of, was it fully non-functional? No.
But it wasn't fully functional either.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So, but there's a little bit of a tech for you out of the blue. So Jeep Beach, some repairs for Jeep Beach, some self-repairs, as well as probably the more important one is from me. Congrats to Autumn and Scott and Butch, both of them, for an awesome Jeep Beach and being recognized for the efforts that you guys have put into it.
And I can't I can't help but thank you again, Kevin, because again you were pivotal in getting him started, and and then at the beginning of this project. And again, I thank you. So does Autumn. It's your knowledge and expertise really went a long way. And it's most
easier when you only have 4-wire to work with.
Yeah. But and I'll leave on this because this has been a very long show. We wanted to make sure we started off on a good foot. When Autumn left and pulled through there, she got to drive the Jeep, and the whole time I'm like, I should have put a GoPro in the back of the Jeep, the Gladiator, so she could record this. But she had to stop like every 2 minutes because everybody either A, wanted a picture, B, wanted to give her a duck, or it was just funny. The good old boys going, whoa, and then their spouse would nudge them saying, why can't I have something cool like that, and they're the guys sitting there on a JK 4-door on 40s, and there's this little GPW, but it was fun.
Which makes a TJ look large.
Well, it's funny because when we started doing the staging, they go, can you make a U-turn? Can you turn that? I say, you don't know the turning radius. We're going to need about 7 of these areas if you want us to make a U-turn. But we got it done. But the only thing I will say, though, is that when we started the oil, when she left, her oil pressure was at 30. By the time we pulled it on the trailer, it was a little bottom end noisy, and we had 5 psi. So it is the writing is on the wall. I am going to be searching for a rebuildable engine to bench build, and that's going to be the next project. Probably is rebuilding an engine to put in it. So
and we'll come back later on another show to explain why he doesn't want to rebuild the one that's in it. There's a story behind that as well. And with that, Scott, I think it's time to lock up, put the Jeep in 4-low, and hit the trail. And yes, it's a teaser, folks.
Exactly. So again, thanks for everything. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, onthetrailpodcast@gmail.com, or send us a Facebook message. And we thank you for joining us with this little journey for both of us, Kevin and I, are doing. So with that,
and
Kevin,
share it if you have friends that you think would like it.
Absolutely, yes, please. We would love if you shared some more of the stuff. And I fixed Spotify, so new episodes are coming on Spotify. So life should be good on that aspect. So with that, Kevin, anything else?
Nope, that's it. Appreciate it, everybody. Bye till next time.
Bye.
Proceeding has been provided for entertainment only. Proper service and repair procedures are vital to the safe, reliable operation of all motor vehicles, as well as personal safety of those performing those repairs. Standard safety procedures and precaution, including the use of safety goggles and proper tools and equipment, should be followed at all times to eliminate the possibility of personal injury or improper service which could damage the vehicle or compromise its safety.
What he said. Thanks a lot for listening, guys. You guys have a great day.
Bye.
This has been a Bent Axle Media production.